Thank you for joining me for part 3 of the pattern creating and editing section of our CLO online training guide. This tutorial is kind of a continuation of the last one about creating pattern pieces, editing them, and now it will extend to cloning pieces out of pieces, tracing pieces out, and then using superimpose functions to get them onto your garment. There are a lot of different types of extraction tools. If you'd like to follow along, go to the link below in the description and you can download the training file to follow along. So a lot of the actions are going to involve either pulling a shape out of a pattern and then sewing it on, and using these functions called superimpose to get our piece close to our garment. So I have a garment here that has some internal lines on it. If you have any questions about how to make these lines on your pattern, you can find that out in the previous tutorials, which are linked below. And we're going to start first with cloning an internal shape as a pattern. So on my front pattern piece, I have this shape for a pocket. Using the transform pattern tool, if you right click on this shape, you are going to find in the right click menu clone as pattern. So once I select that, the shape is going to be in my hand, and we recommend moving off of the 2D pattern that you're currently on and left clicking to place it down somewhere in your 2D window. And then you'll see that pattern generate also in the 3D window. I'm going to take my pocket and apply this different fabric. Because the placement of the pocket is a little bit angled on my pattern, the pocket extracts in the same way, and this gingham is now misaligned on my pattern piece. To fix this, if you switch to this tool called Edit Texture, you will then see the grain direction. If you right click on that piece, you're going to find Align Grain Parallel to Selected. If I choose this, then I can hover over this side edge of the pattern piece, left click, and it will align that print direction. Just a little extra detail. Now I want to sew this pocket onto my garment. I am going to use the free sewing tool to first sew all the edges of the pocket and then sew it onto the internal line on the front of my dress. Okay, so now once this is sewn on, there is a fantastic feature called Superimpose. If you switch to the Select Move tool in your 3D window, I'm going to move my pocket so you can see a little bit better. And if I right click on the pocket piece, we have Superimpose Over, Under, and Side. Because this is a pocket that will be placed smack dab over the fabric, I'm going to choose Superimpose Over. It follows the sewing relationship almost like a track that it follows to attach to where it's sewn to on the garment. And Superimpose does not fully attach the piece to your garment. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to hide my avatar, zoom in very close, and you can see that it's hovering oh so slightly above the surface of my dress. It is not until you hit Simulate, spacebar for simulate, that it's going to fully attach to your garment. As you're extracting pieces out of your garment and designing or creating, Superimpose will help place them without having to deal with arrangement points or the gizmo very much. I have some pieces that have fallen when I simulated. I'm going to select them, right click and choose Reset 2D Arrangement, and continue with the other options. So we extracted a shape from an existing internal shape, but if I have my existing pattern shape and I need the internal, you almost have the same option if you right click on a pattern piece, and it's called Clone as Internal Shape. If I select this, then I will have that heart shape and I can place it down on a pattern. Just to demonstrate, if you select this option and you click not on a pattern, you're going to get this error message that says, please click within a pattern, because internal lines can only be put down on pattern surfaces. So I'm going to say okay, right click and choose clone as internal shape again and put that down here. So because these pieces are symmetrically linked, my front left and right and my back left and right are joined but symmetrically linked. Whenever you have a marking on one side, it will show up on the other side. I have show style lines on, which I can turn off. But this does not mean you are going to have two hearts or two pockets on your garment. This is really only a visual as a result of the patterns having symmetry. I only have one heart pattern piece. I'm going to sew this on. I'm using a double click feature built into the free sewing tool that will move around the entire shape. And then again, I'm not going to just simulate so it flies and attaches to the garment. I'm going to use the superimpose function to right click on that piece and superimpose it over. I can hide my internal lines, and then you won't see the marking for the heart or the pocket, and it's something I can remove completely once my project is completed and I want to merge and remove symmetry. But for now, I can select even this marking where I do have a little dent and turn the fold rendering off. So now that marking is gone. Next, I'm going to sew this neckband on and use Superimpose Side to attach that to the garment. With the free sewing tool, this is the center front and for me the center back. I'm going to start at the center front, move to the back, and then hold shift and attach the neckband to the body. I have symmetry on all the pieces, so this side will also sew together at the same time. I'm going to close the center front and center back. To get these pieces closer to my garment, you can right click on them and choose Superimpose Side, and it's going to take them and align them to what they're sewn to along the edge side of the pattern. So anything that's a sliver like a band or something that just is sewn on and extends off of an edge, Superimpose Side is a really great way to get it there without having to do a lot of work. So I have this little cap sleeve type thing. I'm going to sew this on and use Superimpose as well. Even if you make a symmetrically cloned copy after the fact, when it shows up sewn, you can still right click on it wherever it's floating in space and choose Superimpose Side to attach that there. Next, we're going to take a look at these shapes that are around the hemline. I'm going to turn on show internal lines in my 3D window so we can see all of these markings. So next I want to show you a feature called Convert to Whole. For example, I have all of these little shapes marked out by the hem. If you right click on one of them, you'll find Convert to Whole. That will turn this shape into a whole. What you see here is just related to the particle distance. I will select that temporarily and walk it down to 7, just so you can see that the area will become more defined once the resolution is increased. To work quickly, I'm going to move back to 20. And to convert these to a whole all at once, I am going to use the function for locking all the pattern outlines. Then I'll be able to marquee over all of these internal shapes, right click, convert to whole, and they will all convert to a whole in one action. Now that I'm finished, I can right click in the background and choose unlock all pattern outlines and keep working. Next, I want to show you how to extract a shape that is a combination of internal lines. I have a pocket shape marked on my pattern that isn't actually a fully closed shape. The ending points intersect the pattern outline. And that's what is giving me the visual of this potential shape. I'm going to quickly put that back. As a result, when you right click on this shape, because it is not closed, you will not find an option to clone as pattern. In this case, you are going to have to use the trace tool. The trace tool will allow you to hold shift and select all of the edges that make up this potential shape. It's okay if portions above and below your shape highlight in yellow. So for example, my side seam is fully highlighted, but when I'm on the trace tool and right click on all of these sections, I have trace as pattern. Select that and it will pull this out as a shape that you can then put down. So anytime you have shapes like this that aren't really fully closed, you have to use the trace tool to pull them out. My one tip is that if any portion of your internal line doesn't fully intersect the pattern edge, so here you can see it doesn't really intersect. If I zoom out, I might not notice that so much. In this case, using the trace tool, it will react, but it's not going to pull out a fully closed shape. What it's going to do is extract just an internal shape, which is kind of the best thing that it can do at the moment because it's not finding a closure. So if you do this action and you see something like this, where one, the lines are red, and then two, if you try and put it down, you'll get an error message. Check all of the areas of your shape and make sure that they're fully intersecting the edge before you try and extract this. Because this isn't hitting the edge, I'm going to use the extend trim to pattern outline to have that extend, and then I can go in there no problem, use trace as pattern, and get a completed pattern shape. I'm going to use these two shapes I just made to really quickly construct an on-seam pocket. And because I have this marking here, I'm going to use it to help me to get these pieces inside of my garment. First, I'm going to sew this to the marking that I extracted it from. And then I'll attach this edge to here. And now that it's sewn and has some type of a track to follow, I can use Superimpose Under, and it's going to place that pattern piece just to show you where it went. I'll hide my avatar, and then I can hide this garment piece. And then we can see that this is actually on the inside. So to reinforce Superimpose, I will reset this. Over means the face of the fabric. Under means backside of the fabric. And in this case, I wouldn't be able to use side. It would kind of distort my pattern. But side means along the edge of the pattern. I'm going to undo that. So you can use it in creative ways like this. Even if I don't intend to keep the sewing here, after this is in its place, I can go in and completely delete this sewing and actually delete this marking now, and this piece will be here because I really only need it to be sewn to this edge. And then this remaining piece, I'm going to use Superimpose again. Just take this whole edge, now sews to this whole edge. I will change the sewing line type to turn so the edges can press together. And then just to get this into place, I'm going to sew this to here. Go into the 3D window, right click on your piece and choose Superimpose Under. And now it will place that right behind the first piece that was superimposed. So to finish my sewing quickly, this will just take a really quick sewing adjustment. Initially, the silhouette was put together by closing the side seam completely, but now we can go delete that. I have sewing where this piece, I have the sewing already where this piece is attached. So I can use this guideline. I'm going to sew from there up and then from here down, and then reverse my sewing so it is not twisted. Then I can use the free sewing tool to get this piece attached. Now the sewing that's closing it to the other pocket piece, I can remove that and then go back to the free sewing tool and sew from the bottom opening of the pocket down to the hemline. So I used Superimpose to get those in there. I did not have to use the gizmo. I hid my pieces really just to demonstrate to you, but now that this process is complete, I can really bring all my pattern pieces back. A quick way to do that is just by going over here in this menu and selecting this first show garment option. I'll bring my avatar back. And then we'll go over here. I haven't simulated yet. I'm going to turn show style lines on. And then I'm going to simulate. And we have our pocket opening. So using the trace tool, I was able to pull this shape out. Then I used it to sew the shape that I extracted onto the marking that I used for extraction, and then superimpose just to get my piece into place, and then remove the marking after the fact, get rid of the sewing, and now I have that all finished. Just so I have two pockets. We do not want these pockets to be linked to each other here. These both belong to the wearer's left side. We want them to have their own symmetrically linked clone for the right side. I'm going to push this into the garment, just get that inside a little bit. And then I'm safe to simulate, and all of these pieces will be attached. Okay, we've got a couple more examples on the back to just go through. So the back pattern piece is symmetrically linked, left side and right side, but because it's the type where the pattern piece is joined in the middle, this heart shape that I see also is not closed. It intersects at the center back to look like a fully closed shape, but if I move it away, you'll see that this is actually fully open. Because this is fully open, you also don't have an option for clone as pattern. In this case, what I do recommend doing is actually closing this shape. So I'm going to get internal polygon, draw a line to give my heart a type of center marking. So I have to join this section, and then I have to join this corner as well. Then you can move that back. You can clone this as a pattern. It's going to come out on the half. Unfold it. And then superimpose over to get it into place. I'll apply this gingham fabric. And now we're all attached there. So these little hearts are here for you to just practice cloning it as a pattern, converting it to a hole, whatever you prefer, and then sewing it on with the double click feature and the free sewing tool. Here's another place where you can practice tracing something as a pattern. Here's another location where if I wanted to get this pattern piece out, I can draw an internal line up the center back. That way I'll have something for the trace tool to select. Even though you can't see it when it's at the center back with symmetry, it is there. And then I'm going to put that piece down. Apply that fabric. I don't need this marking. I'm going to delete it, and then I'll unfold it at this area. Get my free sewing tool, grab the one edge, hold shift, attach to the center back, and then center back over. And then I'll use Superimpose Over to get this into place. Feel free to use these sections to extract out and practice just sewing on and superimposing over. I'm going to sew that on, select the piece, change it to my plaid fabric. Before I even do the superimpose, I can right click and make a symmetrically linked copy. I can put this down after. These two pieces are just floating in space. Wherever they are is fine. I can just right click on them, choose Superimpose Over, and they will snap right there. Now that I'm closer towards the end of my garment, I am going to merge my center front body. All the symmetry will stay. If I want to hide these markings on my garment, I'll turn off the internal lines, and then the last two things I'm going to go over is one, a way that you can get ruffles into locations with the Superimpose tool. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to get the rectangle tool, and I'm going to just draw a pretty wide ruffle. This is going to be applied to only one side of the garment, so the ruffle when it's finished will be double this size, completely around the hem. Now I'm going to grab the segment sewing tool. Here my notch is moving and sliding towards the center front, so I'm going to click once, hold shift, make sure here my notch is moving in the direction of the center front, then move over to the back, and again make sure the notch is moving towards the center front, not towards the center back. Left click to finish that sewing. It's okay if this looks like it's crossing over here. That is really just an illusion, because when you shift these around, because if I were to move this piece over here, so the side seams that sew together are near each other, this wouldn't look twisted. And it's not twisted in this window as well. Then I'm going to switch back to select move or transform pattern, right click on that piece and choose Superimpose Side. Even though the piece is larger than the hem itself, it's going to still use the sewing like a track and essentially just shove like all of the mesh in there some way, so it's all kind of just lined up close enough to it. Then with the ruffle, you can hit spacebar and simulate, and that will be attached there. Then I can make my symmetrically linked cloned copy, put that down. I'll use Superimpose Side again also, and now that's all there. Then I can close or merge my center front. The very last little extra thing I'll go over is how I would kind of get the neckband to look better. First, I'm going to just recheck that the length is okay. So I have 10 1/4 here, and if I select a front and back, I have 9.651. So at some point, somehow my band got a little bit larger. That's really easy to fix. So I'm going to go to the transform pattern tool, select this piece, and I really just want to squish it or shorten the width. I'm going to start moving, right click, and then I'm not going to use percentage. I'm going to use the finished width. So I know that the finished width of my neckline was 9.651 about. So for this, I'm going to do 9.2. I always make it a tiny bit shorter. And then I'm going to re-sew this on just in case the sewing became distributed unevenly somehow. So center front to center back, hold shift, center front to shoulder, shoulder to center back. Can simulate. Okay, so that gets this a little bit better. And I have this set to a knit cotton jersey. So the fabric properties should actually be fine. So I'm going to select the very top edge and turn elastic on, but I'm going to make the ratio, I'm going to start very high at about 98 and simulate and see how much that fixes for me. I'll go down to 96. And then I'll move just a tiny bit more to 95. Okay, and that looks good. And when you move to high resolution, this will improve and flatten out and lay closer to the skin even more. So this concludes this tutorial all about cloning, extracting, and superimposing. If you want to keep learning, please check out the following videos in the series, which are linked below.